Okay, so this was I had just come across and researching this article the other day and I shared it with Kiki because I thought it's about a year old. So it's not new information, but I really liked it because it brings up a lot of things that were just shortly after the unalivings occurred, the tragedy. And it just has some things that we may want to revisit as we go along researching this. But anyway, Idaho murders mysteries linger in Moscow weeks after Bryan Kohberger's arrest. As students return for spring semester, this small college town in wheat farming country is still grappling with the brutal killings of four vivacious University of Idaho students. A shrine of teddy bears, flowers, and a framed photo collage still stands in front of the three-story home near campus where three female residents and a male visitor were fatally stabbed in the early morning of November 13th. On Main Street, a table in front of Mad Greek, a restaurant where two of the victims worked, holds four white candles, each bearing the name of the victim. Madison Mogan, 21, a senior in marketing from Coeur d'Alene, I don't know how to pronounce that, I apologize, Idaho, about 1.5 hour drive north of Moscow, was remembered for treasuring her friends and dreaming of world travel, according to interviews conducted by Insider and reports published in other outlets. Kaylee Gonzalez, 21, was excited for her planned post-graduation move to Austin, Texas, to begin a marketing career. Ethan Chapin, 20, of Conway, Washington, was remembered for his bright smile, sense of humor, and, as a triplet, a love of playing sports with his siblings. Xana Kernodle, 20, who grew up in Idaho and Arizona, was remembered for loving her independent life in college and for her fierce spirit. A server at Mad Greek, the restaurant where Mogan and Kernodle worked, and the other victims visited, wore a ribbon on her school's black and yellow colors to honor her friends. So sweet, so friendly, said the young woman who asked Insider to not use her name. Candles for the victims were placed outside Mad Greek in downtown Moscow. Nate Schweber, after a nearly 7-week manhunt, questions about what could have motivated someone to harm the students grew even more pitched after the police finally arrested a suspect on December 30th. Despite attempts to make sense of the killings, a motive remains elusive weeks later, and questions have mounted about why one of the surviving roommates waited until just before noon to call police after she'd seen a masked man in her home around 4 a.m. Timing of the 911 call. The police say Dylan Mortensen, one of the two surviving roommates, heard what she thought was crying around the time of the alleged murders, and a male voice she didn't recognize saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." She told authorities that she went to her door and saw a man dressed in black and wearing a ski mask coming toward her and froze, but that after he exited through a backsliding glass door, she locked her own bedroom door and went back to bed. She finally called 911 at 11:58 a.m. after first calling friends over to ask what to do about finding one of her roommates not moving, according to early news reports citing police sources. And then there was the haziness surrounding the grisly discovery. Confusion ensued in the hours before the police were called, said another neighbor who identified herself as the best friend of one of the surviving roommates and asked not to be named for privacy reasons. She said she came to the house soon after the crime was discovered and learned from the surviving roommates, Mortensen and Bethany Funk, that someone on the second floor wasn't moving. She said she first presumed the person had ingested, quote, something from someone that was laced, end quote. It wasn't until later that she learned 4 people she knew had been stabbed and were not unconscious but dead. When I was out there that day, I wasn't comprehending, she said, and I'm still not. A memorial sits outside the home where 4 University of Idaho students were killed in November. A party house. The victim's hilly campus adjacent neighborhood, crammed with large and small apartment buildings, plus family homes with rooms rented by students, was known as a party zone. A friend and neighbor of the victims, who said they often visited the gray 3-story home with the large balcony and a barbecue and a sofa in the backyard, described it as a normal girl party house. Several residents of a large brick apartment building next door described disruptive late-night parties with loud country music and numerous visitors coming and going through an unlocked door. Police were called to respond to complaints of loud parties at the house 3 times since August, according to reports obtained by Insider. A Lyft driver, Vincent Sheets, said he'd started refusing to pick up or drop off anyone in the vicinity of the house on party nights because he'd experienced incidents in which his car was hit with vomit and people threw objects while he was driving. He said he previously worked as a caterer at several University of Idaho fraternity and pick up or drop off anyone in the vicinity of the house on party nights because he'd experienced incidents in which his car was hit with vomit and people threw objects while he was driving. He said he previously worked as a caterer at several University of Idaho fraternity and sorority houses, and he couldn't take it. The amount of drugs and alcohol in this was mind-fucking boggling, he told Insider, so I quit. Gonzalez was a member of the Alpha Phi sorority. Kernodle and Mogan were members of Pi Beta Phi, and Chapin was a member of Sigma Chi. The sororities were on probation at the University of Idaho in the weeks after the killings for health and safety violations. According to the university's Greek Life website, health and safety violations are about concerns regarding risk management, alcohol, drugs, or hazing. Traumatized and scrutinized. In Moscow, some of the victims' neighbors speculated that Mortensen might have been intoxicated at the time of the killings and therefore did not respond appropriately to encountering a strange man in her house. But the house was known for frequent guests and noisiness, in an area known for rowdy parties. Neighbors, too, were used to late-night disturbances. Matthew Moy, 22, a neighbor and a friend of Mortensen's, defended her against criticism. She's been through one of the most traumatic things you can go through, and people are attacking her, he said. When you're in a stressful situation, you might not act how people think. At closing time on a late October weekend, Kaylee Gonzalez hired a Lyft driver, Dakota Kidder, to drive her and Madison Mogan home from a local bar. They had spent their night, as they also would on the night of the murders, at the Corner Club. The popular watering hole is a small windowless haunt made of gray cinder blocks where 20-somethings sip cocktails made from Mike's Hard Lemonade, twisted tea, and rum. They were nice. They were not like sloppy drunk or anything. They were great riders, Kidder told Insider. They even tipped. A photo of Bryan Kohberger was removed from a photo display at Washington State University's Wilson Short Hall, where he was working on a PhD in criminology. A disturbing new detail. The suspect in the killings, Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old, 6-foot-tall, 185-pound criminology student who neighbors described as friendly and talkative, was enrolled at Washington State University in nearby Pullman, Washington. Prosecutors say cell phone data shows he made the 22-mile round-trip drive from his apartment to the house where the killings took place no fewer than a dozen times before the murders. But there was no further known connection between the suspect and the victims, and accounts that have surfaced about the suspected killer since his arrest have provided no clear motive or revealed any history that would suggest a propensity to kill. Kohberger's arrest on December 30th, however, triggered talk of a disturbing new detail. For hours before and after the killings, Washington State University police and Whitman County Sheriff's deputies were posted outside the suspect's apartment because of a bloody hit and run reported at 11:40 p.m. on November 12th that sent 2 pedestrians to the hospital with serious injuries. Turner Gardner, 26, told Insider that a man had been thrown from the road and a woman lay face down screaming. It was horrifying, she said, of coming upon the scene just before midnight on November 12th. I heard a screech and a loud bang, another witness, Andrea McKenzie, 25, told Insider. It was scary. Within 24 hours, police had Carmen E. Fernandez in custody. The 19-year-old Kappa Delta sorority member was charged with vehicular assault and DUI, according to police and press reports. But first, there was a manhunt, according to local press reports. Cell phone data laid out in court documents shows Kohberger's phone at his home in the early hours of November 13th. A second-story window likely gave Kohberger, who, according to neighbors and court documents, was an insomniac, a view of the scene. It was also within earshot. He left his apartment about 2:42 a.m. on November 13th, according to cellular data and traffic camera footage compiled by prosecutors. his white Hyundai sedan traveling 11 miles to Moscow. Prosecutors say he then committed the grisly murders, leaving behind a knife sheath containing the DNA that would eventually lead to his arrest. By 5:30 a.m., cell tower pings showed his phone back at his home. The police were there the whole time. Jose Mercado, 19, a student who lives in a nearby apartment with a view of both Kohberger's building and the accident scene, told Insider. While authorities had no reason to believe 4 people had been murdered in the neighboring town, it's unclear if the crash had anything to do with the killings or if 2 bloody crime scenes not far from each other was a simple coincidence. It makes you wonder if things could have been different, Faith Grossi, 19, told Insider, standing in a student room with a window facing the hit-and-run scene in Kohberger's apartment. At 9 a.m., Kohberger's phone was on the move again, prosecutors said, and it returned to the scene of the murders before arriving back at his Pullman home at 9:32 a.m. Around noon, about the time Moscow police found the victims and the hunt for the killer began, Kohberger's phone pings indicate that he likely slipped out of his apartment and passed Pullman police once more. A suspect at ease, a community on edge. We're almost done. Kohberger then took a long drive winding through hilly wheat fields and past grain silos and red barns to the confluence of the Snake and Clearwater rivers, according to security camera footage presented by prosecutors. He shopped at an Albertsons grocery store in the town of Clarkston, Washington. His cell phone was next tracked, traveling east for more than an hour towards the Bitterroot Mountains, said prosecutors. He returned, seemingly unnoticed, to Pullman and fell back into his school routine. In addition to his doctoral studies, Kohberger worked as a teaching assistant in the university's criminology department and had even applied for an internship with the Pullman Police Department, which would eventually help nab him, according to court documents. The unsolved killings set the campus on edge, with students staying inside, canceling appointments, and even leaving town early out of fear of a killer on the loose. But Kohberger appeared in a notably bright and cheery mood, according to interviews conducted by Insider. One of his students said he stopped grading after the killings, but he also attended a routine medical appointment 4 days later and was so friendly with staff members that they took notice. Kohberger, an arrest but no closure. It would take the police several weeks to identify Kohberger as the suspect. He was arrested at his parents' house in Pennsylvania's Pocono Mountains while visiting for the holidays, after the DNA on the knife sheath found at the crime scene was matched to his father's DNA, which authorities collected from a trash can outside his parents' Pennsylvania home. But the arrest and subsequent affidavit laying out prosecutors' theory of the crime has hardly brought closure. People here still remember where they were when the last murder in Moscow happened nearly a decade ago in 2015, and residents from the towns nearby stood in the cold to watch Kohberger enter the Latah County Jail on January 4th. We're a little town that's really freaked out and in pain, Julia Paskowski, a University of Idaho teacher, said from outside the jail that night. This changed us. And then there's just a update and a correction. Update as of January 18th, 2023. This story has been updated to include the fact that Chapin was a member of the Sigma Chi fraternity. Okay. Correction. An earlier version of the story misstated disciplinary actions that were taken against Alpha Phi and Pi Beta Phi sororities. They were on probation for health and safety violations, not suspension. And the last correction was, because of an editing error, an earlier version of this story misstated where a knife sheath with Bryan Kohberger's DNA was found. The knife sheath was found inside the home where 4 students were killed, not in the trash can outside. And that's it. I just thought that was a really great synopsis and some details that really hadn't stuck out to me before.